All right, moving to problem 2, it's asking us to figure out what is the rule for each equation. And going back to the rules, I know that my rules need to be in the form of a y equals mx plus b equation. And we have been talking in class about how we figure out what those are. We always know that b is always the starting point, and we always know that m is always the growth each time. So in this very first one, most students get this part correct. They recognize that the starting point in a graph b is the y-intercept, and so we would find that right where our line crosses the y-axis. So most students found out that this was correctly 24. And then most students also correctly identified that m is our growth, which means how much it is growing each time, and students recognized that that was going to be this length right here, which is really good. However, the place where students usually miss this problem was when we were looking at this part, we got confused about our scale. So students that missed this usually got confused about the scale. I know that this point is 24. I can see that this point is 12, and it is 4 squares away. And so I also know that 12 in the other direction, if that's 4 squares away, that also has to be 12. So I know that the y or the x-axis is the value 0. So if I can go 1, 2, 3, 4 squares and I get to 12, what does that mean the value is of each square? It's not 1. It's got to be something else. So if I wanted to figure that out, I would do 12. I know that the distance between these is 12, right? I can do 24 minus 12, which is 12. So it means that these are 12 apart from each other. Okay, so that means that this distance here is 12. And it also means that this distance here is also 12. And then if I do this distance, and these lines divide this distance into 4 parts. So 12 divided by 4 equals 3. So I know that each one of these distances here is 3. So if I do 12 divided by 4, I will get one of these lengths here, which has to equal 3. So if those were 3, that means, right, if I go up 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, and 24, if each of these is worth 3, then if I see that this square is going down 2 squares, a lot of students said it was going, thought that this was going down 2. So they said minus 2. But it's actually, because each of these is worth 3, it's actually minus 2 times 3, which is, so this is negative 2 times 3, which equals negative 6. So our m should be negative 6 here. So some students got this wrong because they said negative 2 instead of negative 6. Other students missed this because they forgot that when it goes down, that it is a negative value. And some students, even though they did this thinking over here and said they forgot that it was subtracting. And so they said 6x plus 24 instead of minus 6x plus 24. So that's how we do A. Most people did better on B. Students were very good at recognizing on B that, that we want y equals mx plus b as our format. And students were really good at recognizing that m is, as we go over 1, we are going up 2, so that my rise is 2. And that part, I actually shouldn't have drawn that in orange. This is not part of, so m is calculated by doing the rise divided by the run. Some students did add these together. You should not be adding these. M, if you're thinking about m in terms of rise over run, we know that m is equal to the rise over the run. This means the rise divided by the run. So in this case, 2 divided by 1. And 2 divided by 1 is 2. So it's just this number here. So m should be 2. That is going to become 2. And then the other part is that what we have here, what we show for B, we show students knew that this was the point, but what we show there is not a line or not a value. It is a set of coordinates for b. It says when x is 0, this is the xy coordinate, so this is when x is 0, y is 4. So this tells us that the y, so that this is crossing at point 0, 4, which means that it is crossing the y-axis, it is crossing the y-axis at 4. So our final equation here should be y equals 2x plus 4. Now, some students looked at this and they were a little bit confused. We haven't done a lot of work with this, and some students thought this said 0.4 instead. And so they wrote for the y, or for b, that the y-intercept was 0.4. And that is, like, that's good thinking if that's what you saw that as, but I mean, there are other dots here. Like, we can tell that that's definitely not a comma, so hopefully we will see that in the future. But also, like, I sort of looked at that and was like, yeah, that's a mistake, but I see how you're misreading it. It's not 0.4. It is the coordinates 0 and 4. But if you did see that and think it said 0.4, I circled it. I did not mark you as correct, but I was like, okay, if that's what you thought it was, then that's exactly what you should have written. So if you did think this was 0.4, you should have written 0.4 there, and that's what that would have been. So I sort of counted that as like a pretty small mistake, but it is still a mistake. You should not read a ordered pair like that as a decimal. Okay, so that's how we do section 2.